Welcome back, Focus Learners. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today for another deep dive. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the layers of America's most infamous unsolved double murder. It's a story that seriously has it all, right? Enormous wealth, a locked room mystery, a totally sensational Victorian courtroom drama, and a modern legacy that'll send shivers straight down your spine. So, let's just jump right in.
Now, you've probably heard this one before. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. It's that chilling schoolyard nursery rhyme kids have been whispering for over a century, pretty much cementing Lizzie Borden right into American folklore. It's the cultural myth we all kind of know, but here's the wild part. It gets so much completely wrong. We're going to separate that folklore from the actual forensic reality.
So our explainer today covers three main areas. First, the infamous Borden murders. Second, a trial of gender. And third, the paranormal legacy.
Let's start with Section 1, the infamous Borden murders, fact versus fiction.
You know, it's funny how pop culture totally distorts historical crimes. Let's just go ahead and debunk that famous rhyme right out of the gate. First up, the murder weapon actually wasn't a large axe. Forensic evidence strongly points to a much smaller hatchet. Second, the violence, while obviously incredibly brutal, was definitely exaggerated in the rhyme. Abby Borden actually received 19 blows, not 40, and Andrew suffered 11 strikes to the head, not 41. Oh, and here's a crucial detail. Abby was not Lizzie's mother, she was her stepmother. And as you'll see, that distinction becomes incredibly important later on. Now, despite his massive wealth as a bank president, Andrew Borden was, well, famously miserly. He kept his family in this really modest, raw-boned duplex on 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. And the house was literally physically divided. There were no hallways on the 2nd floor, and the family kept the doors heavily bolted, basically living these strangely separated lives all under one single roof.
And then, on the morning of August 4th, that divided home became an absolute slaughterhouse. The macabre timeline here is what makes this so baffling. Abby was killed first, ambushed up in the guest room with those 19 hatchet blows. Then an hour and a half goes by, 90 full minutes. Around 11 a.m., Andrew returns home from his business errands, lies down on the sitting room couch, and is then attacked with 11 blows that completely smashed his face. And get this, the autopsies were actually performed right there on the family's dining room table. I mean, wow.
So the really crucial point here is the logistics of the crime itself. The house was heavily locked and bolted. It was kind of like a Borden family obsession. So you have to ask yourself, how can an outside madman sneak in, violently kill Abby, successfully hide out in this tiny house for 90 minutes while Lizzie and the maid, Bridget Sullivan, were just walking around, and then leap out, kill Andrew, and escape completely undetected? Honestly, it seemed impossible. And that right there is exactly why the police arrested 32-year-old Lizzie Borden.
Moving on to Section 2, a trial of gender, the 1892 courtroom drama.
This 1892 courtroom drama effectively birthed the modern true crime media circus as we know it. And because the entire case was circumstantial, meaning no confession, no bloody clothes found, no definitive weapon, both sides really had to craft a narrative about Lizzie's character. The prosecution painted her as this cold, greedy, totally unnatural daughter, but the defense completely countered that. They presented her as a fragile, dutiful Christian gentlewoman who just couldn't possibly possess the monstrous strength or, frankly, the psychology required for that kind of slaughter.
So, the prosecution worked super hard to prove Lizzie was unnatural. They highlighted these intense family conflicts over property, basically suggesting sheer greed as the motive. They made a big point of noting that Lizzie coldly referred to her stepmother as Mrs. Borden, even when her body was literally still lying upstairs. They even brought up that Lizzie tried to buy a deadly poison, prussic acid, the day before the murders, supposedly claiming she needed it to clean her fur coat. Yeah, right. And worst of all, in the eyes of Victorian society, she showed absolutely no tears right after discovering her father's butchered body.
But on the other hand, the defense built this absolutely brilliant counter-narrative by skillfully using the gender norms of the time to their advantage. They argued it was physically and morally impossible for a refined gentlewoman to commit such savagery. They highlighted her deep love for her father, even noting that he actually wore a ring Lizzie gave him to his grave. And as for that lack of tears, the defense had a perfect explanation. The family doctor had heavily sedated her with bromocaffeine and morphine. Finally, they threw in some alternative suspects, including a French farmer's tale about a blood-stained wild man wielding a hatchet out in the nearby woods. Now, this is a really interesting detail. Her fate rested entirely in the hands of an all-male jury. Think about that for a second. To convict her, these 12 men would have to openly accept that a wealthy, church-going woman from their very own social class was actually capable of being a cold-blooded monster.
And defense attorney George Robinson played this dynamic perfectly. He told the jury they had this innocent woman in your charge, appealing directly to their Victorian masculine duty to protect a delicate female. It's wild. Even the presiding judge, Justin Dewey, who, fun fact, actually owed his political appointment to Robinson, practically argued for the defense in his final instructions to the jury, finding innocent excuses for literally all of Lizzie's suspicious behavior.
So, what was the result of all this? 90. Yep, that is the number of minutes the jury deliberated. After weeks of complex testimony and, honestly, overwhelming circumstantial evidence, it took them a mere hour and a half to return a verdict of not guilty, completely acquitting Lizzie Borden.
Which brings us to Section 3, the paranormal legacy, America's most haunted murder scene.
Because nobody was ever punished for this crime, that incredible lack of legal closure created a massive paranormal hotspot. Parapsychology researchers often point to something called the energy imprint theory to explain the Borden house. The whole concept is that traumatic, violent events leave behind this emotional and energetic residue that gets embedded in the physical structure itself. When you combine brutally violent deaths with completely unresolved justice, well, you create the absolute ideal conditions for a persistent haunting.
Over the years, countless ghost hunters and paranormal investigators have flocked to Fall River, and they've documented an astonishing array of phenomena. We're talking Class A electronic voice phenomena, including actual recordings of a woman's voice pleading, "Help me." Investigators have recorded sudden, totally unexplained temperature drops of 15 to 20 seconds, actually scratch that, 15 to 20 degrees in mere seconds. Objects move on their own, full-bodied apparitions have been caught on thermal cameras, and visitors frequently hear the eerie laughter of ghost children up in the attic where the maid, Bridget, used to sleep.
And today, the haunting is incredibly interactive. The property was actually purchased in 2021 for $2 million and operates as an active bed and breakfast. That's right, you can literally sleep in the very rooms where the murders occurred. Guests who stay in Abby's room, the guest room where the first murder took place, frequently report the distinct sensation of feeling invisible hands on their shoulders, or even feeling the sudden, heavy weight of someone sitting right down on the edge of their bed in the middle of the night. No, thank you.
I actually really love this detail from one of our sources. A travel writer brought his 10-year-old son Danny on a tour of the house. Danny took notes, writing that the post-mortem dummies on the tour were scary because, quote, Mr. Borden's eyes were out. He matter-of-factly noted that a ghost boy hides under a green chair and then confidently concluded that Lizzie might not have actually caused the crime. It perfectly showcases the authentic, chilling, yet deeply fascinating atmosphere of the house today. It's this unique place where history and the supernatural just blend perfectly together.
So whether you're an academic investigating 19th century history, a true crime aficionado analyzing the forensic timeline, or a ghost hunter seeking out supernatural energy, the house on 2nd Street remains a true vortex of fascination. And it really holds that power precisely because the ultimate truth remains hidden. The lack of a clear answer is exactly what keeps the story alive. Which leaves us to ponder the ultimate, chilling unknown. The jury said she was innocent. The folklore says she is guilty. But if Lizzie Borden didn't pick up that hatchet and commit these brutal, calculating murders while locked inside her own home, then who on earth did? Think about that and let your curiosity guide you until our next explainer. Catch you later!